Although many counties already voted whether to enact a property tax cap, a trial today could determine if those caps could actually go into effect. Our Missouri Capitol reporter Hannah Falcon explains.
The question today in court is, can the lawmakers enact different property tax caps for different counties?
School districts and fire protection districts are suing the state of Missouri over a law that creates property tax caps for some counties. The lawsuit argues it's against the state constitution to cherry pick which counties can receive a tax cap.
And if it's a chronic problem all across the state of Missouri, then a state law could be made applicable.
The counties in purple on this map could have their property taxes frozen at the current rate. The ones in red would be limited to only a 5% maximum increase every 2 years, while the ones in gray would not be affected.
None of the policy objectives explain why the General Assembly chose which counties would get tax relief and which would not, and which one would get the type of tax relief, 0 and 5%.
Many counties already held an election to decide whether to implement the tax freeze.
The prohibition against subclassification, further subclassification, does not prohibit any legislation in the area of residential property.
The Missouri Constitution says the General Assembly shall not pass any local or special law, but lawyers for the state say this law is clearly defined.
Fundamentally, no matter how you choose to slice it, the vast majority of counties were properly designated underneath the rubric laid out by the legislature.
This law is part of the same law the Kansas City Royals are using to build their new stadium. This lawsuit will not affect the Royal Stadium, but a separate lawsuit going before the Missouri Supreme Court in September could. The judge today said a ruling could come in this case late next week. Reporting in Jefferson City, I'm Hannah Falcon.